Welcome to the Unbuild It podcast. I'm Jake Bruton, and today this is Switzerland day 4. This is a whirlwind. Day 4. Tim's nodding. Tim remembers we're on a podcast, so he's nodding instead of interrupting and saying yes.
Yes, day 4 ish.
And now that you know Tim Uhler is here, Tim is filling in for Steve. Steve had a previous commitment and couldn't make the trip with us. We also have another co-host today, our third wheel taking Peter's place. We're sorry that Peter can't be here, but mental health professionals have plenty of control over your life. That 72-hour hold made him miss a flight. Michael Conneely is here. Michael is co-owner. Is co-owner the correct term?
Yes.
Okay.
If I have a partner, I suppose I have a co-owner.
There you go. Of Greenside Design Build, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And Michael is one of the tour participants, just like Tim and I. And we're going to talk about day 4. On day 4. Imagine that. Do we want to work backwards? Do we want to start where we're at right now, since we're doing it at a manufacturer, and then talk about what we did this morning?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure, yeah. I'm used to going backwards.
Pulling nails and putting it back together? Yes. So we are at a window manufacturer, and now I don't remember the name of the window manufacturer.
Haupt.
Haupt.
Yeah.
H-A-U-P-T.
Yep.
This is a small family-owned business, 100 employees, and they have a fenestration company and a building company. And we didn't get to see the building company because we were kind of limited on time, but we got to see kind of the coolest window manufacturer tour I've ever been on. Walk us through it, Tim.
Oh, man. We should make Michael walk us through it.
We can do that. I like uncomfortable moments.
Yeah,
Michael, you want to take over?
Sure.
Here we go.
Thanks, guys.
Anytime.
Sure. We arrived. It's in rural Switzerland, actually not too far from the Siga headquarters, which was kind of nice. They are a window manufacturer of historic windows, so they do a lot of window replacement all over Switzerland. They do it in the historically significant buildings, obviously. So it was interesting to see and learn about their history. We met the third generation?
Yeah, I think
it was third. Yeah, his grandfather started it, right?
Yep.
Yeah, 1914.
They third and fourth, even.
Yeah.
We met the fourth as well. Yeah.
Yeah, they gave us, their company history. The grandfather started it in 1914, I think it was.
I think that's what he said. Yeah.
Yeah. Been through the wars and economic depressions and
fire. Didn't the thing burn down and
fire.
He rebuilt it?
That's right. So it was interesting to learn all that information and kind of see how he got a little emotional, or how much pride he has in the family business. They've surpassed their 100-year anniversary, I guess, and pretty neat. They then took us down to where the magic happens, to the manufacturing floor, where we got to see how they bring in all their materials, all their high-tech saws and CNC machines. I thought that was pretty cool.
Let's talk about this CNC process. First of all, wow. It's really cool. I mean, we keep talking about this, but it's a factory. Factories do things really well, way better than we do out in the rain and the mud and everything. And I kind of forget that from time to time, being a builder. But the CNC machine has 5 CNCs inside this, basically one enormous room-sized cabinet. And it has 180 different tools that attach to it.
Which is mind-boggling.
I mean, so yeah, he said 180, and then we walked around the backside, and there was that glass screen where you could see the tool selection area. And I was just like, oh, 180. My brain was just like, I know that number. That's a lot. I felt really stupid as soon as I looked at it and was like, oh. But the piece that was coming out, the work piece that, you put the Play-Doh in one side and the piece that comes out the other side, it was kind of mind-boggling, and I really was staring at it, not understanding what was going on. And I was like, I thought that I understood Windows, and there's routed sections for the hardware that goes around the outside. There's these very narrow biscuits cut on sides. There's dowel holes in the corners and everything. They're all wood windows. They do wood with cladding, but the majority of the windows are wood because of the historical nature or the the duplicating of the historical nature. And then they clamped the thing together, and they even just it was like a dozen toothpicks were dipped in wood glue and then touched to the end of the miter cut, and it was like perfectly laid out in a grid. I'm like, oh yeah, it makes sense. You don't want it to be squeezing out, and you don't want to waste glue, and you don't want to have to clean it. Like, oh, we should be really good at putting glue on.
And did you hear him say it took one guy 2 years to get that pattern dialed in?
Yeah.
To program all the patterns. Yeah, that's crazy.
And then they square and clamp the thing, and then the next step we saw, they were cutting the workpiece into two pieces, and I immediately went, oh, it's the part that holds the glass in and the part that holds the glass, and all they're doing is, like in woodworking, you make a 6-sided box, then you cut it apart, and then it all fits back together well. And it was another one of those, just like, oh, I'd never considered it before, so I'd never thought about it before, and my mind was just like, oh, that's interesting. Like, I wanted to like push the people around me, like, did you see how they did that? When we're all standing there watching it, obviously. Yeah. He did say the factory is Minergy certified, which is like the passive house for Switzerland, and they're the only historic window manufacturer that has Minergy certified windows in all of Switzerland. So
that's true.
He said there were like 5 other really good high quality companies.
And why is that? So since these guys are doing restoration, why is it such a feat to get?
Some of it's new, but some of it's restoration. Okay. So on the new stuff, I'm guessing is what they're saying is that they're the only one that's had a historic renovation or a new house that's built to this standard that has the historic style windows in it.
I love the CEO. I like his understated, like the word pride can have so many negative connotations, but even like, okay, I want to tell the story about the employees striking. That one actually kind of hit me in the gut. So the owner and his son show up. Nobody's here.
His brother.
His brother. Nobody's here working, and they can't figure it out. And then they hear the sound of a crowd outside. And it is, in fact, the employees striking, except they just wanted to show their appreciation for all these years of work, for centuries.
Yeah, for their 100th anniversary.
It was the 100-year anniversary, yeah.
So you can tell something about them if the employees appreciate it that much.
Yeah, no kidding. And even, we're getting a translated version, but even when Etienne's translating, he's like, he talked about how much it meant to him that they took that pride and that they were thankful for their jobs.
It's like the owner, he was emotional. Etienne's emotional translating it. I'm emotional.
And we're emotional listening to it. Yeah, it's a great story. And not to jump ahead jump back to the other location we were at, but there was a similar story with their employees when they were remodeling or refinishing or adding on to their factory. But I guess we'll jump into that a little later.
Yeah, we do. We should talk about that though. And okay, so now we have really high quality wood windows, and everything down there goes from being completely automated to like this very hands-on, like we're setting the glazing by hand. We're applying sealant by hand. And I asked when we were walking back over, and he said that it's easier to just do it by hand because then it can be inspected as they're doing it. Like there's all these little things where it's like, yeah, we can have this 5-head CNC beast that took years to program, but her paying attention while she's doing the sealant is a higher quality.
Yeah,
product.
and we were just down there. So she's only been at it 6 months. The other guy said she's doing great, which I think she really appreciated because here's a bunch of, American men standing there recording her doing the process, right? 2 years, and they kind of master that process.
Yeah. Wow. 2 years of putting sealant in, which it goes back to that conversation about, you can have 100-year company because you're thinking about things in the long term in a country where houses are older than the United States, that like it doesn't sound ridiculous to take 2 years to learn a specific craft in the factory. It's just a completely different way of looking at things. And it kind of, obviously it makes you question the way that we do things back in the States, where there's like, it's just a different level of pride. The employees aren't striking at Coca-Cola to show the management at Coca-Cola how
I was trying to think of an analogy to that in the U.S., and I'm sure we see more of that on the East Coast than the West Coast, because so much of the West Coast is new, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like Midwest communities, like where my parents grew up in North Dakota, you can have that. The family's been on the farm for 2 or 3 generations, and they're we could even see it in Eastern Washington when we go drive around and take pictures. The tiniest town has a parade every year.
Yeah.
Everybody's there for it.
Yeah.
I think a slight difference in the attitudes from America to Europe is that focus on sustainability. It seems like everywhere we go here, the push is on, and they're kind of bragging about, this is what we do for sustainability. And it's almost like a, what's the word to describe it? Like a cool or hip term in the United States. You say it, but do you really mean it? And to see them focusing so much on it, I just think we have a lot to learn from how they're functioning.
Well, do you want to talk to us about the last part of the tour that we just walked through?
Yes, that was really interesting. And what was really interesting about it is he knew all his numbers. He knew all the percentages, a window maker knowing all this stuff about energy and energy production. So what they do here is all the waste wood, all the dust collection that they have from the factory is collected into an area behind the shop and actually burned to heat their facility, but they only need to use 40% of what they of their waste to heat their facility. So what they do is actually sell off the energy from that burn to neighboring businesses, or one was a gymnasium, I think he said.
There was two, I think he said two different gyms, like a public gym and a membership gym.
Yeah.
A concert hall of some sort, or a concert space. Like they're piping water across the
Heated water, yes.
Heated water across a little creek and underneath a soccer pitch over to create heating, district heating for multiple other buildings in the area. And he said it was like 4 times the amount of total energy that they need, or heated water that they need, that they are able to generate with the waste from their facility. Yeah. And then they also have solar on the roof that's enough to carry the whole facility if they need as well.
And then explain to me, there's no air conditioning, but how the building is kept comfortable on warm days.
Yeah. So he said that the building that we're in, one of their goals is people. They want to take care of their employees. They want them to be comfortable. He said auditory, light. The plant was very quiet. Like there was nobody down there was wearing hearing protection. We didn't have to have the tour guide things on. They vent at night and then they close the building up, which is like, if you live in a lot of the places in the United States, like where I live, we can't vent at night. There are nights where it's still 93 degrees outside, but here it does cool at night. Generally speaking, it gets below 75 in the evening. They're able to rush the air out the top. I'm sure that's just as simple. Like they have area around the bottom that vents to area around the top, and it cools the whole building. And it was maybe 1:30 when we were on the top floor of this building, and it was perfectly comfortable up there, and it felt like it had conditioned air. And it is, let's see, I'm looking at my watch. It's 80 degrees outside. Imagine that. We're using science to not have to have air conditioning. Like it makes perfect sense if you've ever lived in a house that was in the shade. It's an amazing little thing that, like, if we have a little bit of common sense with how we design the building, they put their own windows in their building. In case you didn't read the hardware in here.
Did you hear how much these windows cost?
No.
An individual window could be $1,000 or $20,000
or
somewhere in between. It's either or. It's either this price or that price. There's no in between.
Well, it's a different style of building, and if that window is going to be in there for 100 years, you have a different opinion on how it's going to be. And the building here is gorgeous. I always joke about when people talk energy efficiency in the United States, it's like half the buildings that are built that are energy efficient are disgusting looking. It's like you can either be into design or you can be into green building, but you can't do both. Switzerland has mastered both. Most of the buildings that we've seen that were energy efficient were really beautiful. I mean, maybe that's
like a pleasure to walk those stairs.
Yeah.
And look at the walls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The entryway here with the cast elevator, the way that the treads lay out with the central elevator column, the top tread starts at the outside corner of that concrete wall, and the bottom tread has like 2 or 3 inches of wiggle room where the steps could be adjusted and it not protrude past. And I was just like, man, the planning that went into just putting this stair tower together is more than any commercial building that I've seen in the United States. Family-owned business, 100 years of history, right?
Yeah.
We also came from another family-owned business that's fourth generation, right? Or fifth generation. I think he said fifth generation.
I think he was
They're
fifth,
in
yeah.
their fifth, so they are getting ready to hand it over to three brothers that represent the fifth generation. Yeah.
And I have to bring up my phone so that I can read the company's name. Ringley, RENGGLI. And if you're on Instagram, it's _SWISS.
Just go to Awesome Framers Reels
tag 'em.
and you'll just find the tag, yeah. And then tell all your friends about that. Okay.
And so this was we saw a prefab and panelized construction manufacturer the other day that was a substantially smaller scale and nowhere near as not advanced, computerized or Automated. Thank you. We need to have Mike on every podcast. He just says the word when you're thinking of it. Let's do it again. What am I thinking of?
I can't say on this podcast.
I couldn't remember the word he just said.
Applesauce.
Yeah, it was a really cool facility. They gave us a nice presentation before we started. And then one of the first things they put up on the whiteboard, that it was a quote that really kind of captured my eye. They said, "Innovation is not a guarantee against failing, but without innovation, failing is guaranteed." And I thought that was kind of representative of all of what we've seen in Switzerland so far, but especially at that plant or that factory. The saws, the work lines, the workflows. I mean, everything was just like from outer space, so to speak, from what we're used to. And it was really quiet in there. There wasn't a lot of commotion. Everything was neat and organized and orderly. And they were putting out some high performance panels and floor systems for these Swiss buildings that are all, beyond passive what we see in the United States. And it was just cool to see how advanced and, the walls are 12 inches thick. It's crazy.
Yeah. So let's talk about the front wall of their facility real quick.
Yeah. Getting back to the family story or the dedication or loyalty of the employees. Similar story. It was the owner's birthday. It was his 50th birthday. And they were in the middle of putting a huge addition and renovation onto the manufacturing facility. And the building was clad in, whatever their architect or designer decided to clad it in. And it was nothing fancy. But they thought to themselves, hey, wouldn't it be great if we could put something nice on the exterior of this building? They wanted to put Western red cedar. Well, that was way beyond the budget that they had estimated for the building. And the employees got together and decided, hey, for his 50th birthday, we'll kick in and we'll pay for, the added cost of all this cedar exterior siding. So the employees came in on their days off and they took a section of the exterior. They went by teams and they installed the cedar shake siding on each area of the building and got the building done and finished. And, they presented to the owner and he was all emotional. And I guess the going joke there is who has the best section of siding, whose is the most straight. So it was a tremendous show of company pride, and I thought it was pretty touching that they did that.
I walked down the one, and I can never stop looking for straight lines. And I'm like, those shingles aren't that straight. Maybe the Swiss, maybe they're a little bit like me, where when you get tired, things can kind of, and then they tell that story, and it's like, the imperfection makes the story, or makes the wall even more perfect.
Yeah.
He said the people that still work there that were involved in it pick at each other about, well, that was your team that did
totally
that.
Be doing the same every day, walking and be like, I should have helped you on that side.
It's too bad they put you right next to the door where all of us have to see it. Also, in the background, if you just heard a yee for like 40 seconds,
I think we just grasping for the word
automation. We're sitting in a little conference room, and two of the windows just automatically opened. I'm guessing that
it's all the CO2 generated by the podcast.
I'm guessing that it is part of the ventilation strategy for this building, because there is a sensor above each one of those windows that just opened.
And for the record, they're both right over Jake.
Well, way
Maybe they
to out me on that one. Excuse me, I guess is what I meant to say. Okay, and now they're closing. That's interesting.
Interesting.
That was a very quick vent. We're going to sit here in silence for 10 seconds. Sorry.
They look like door closure type units right over the sash of the window.
Mike and I had already talked about them and said, what are these door closer looking things? But it's just automated window opening and closing. Hence why they don't have a handle, and hence why you couldn't get it open a while ago. We were trying to figure out how to open that one. Okay, so they are a larger firm than what we visited the other day. They're focusing a lot on multifamily. And one of the things that he talked about, and we're very grateful that the CEO of the company took 2 hours out of his day or 3 hours out of his day to give us a tour. They're focusing on just being agile. Like, whatever you want, we can do, which is like the opposite of most manufacturing. And he just kept saying, like, well, the Swiss market isn't big enough. If we specialized in one thing, we wouldn't stay busy. So we're just going to do all of it. And you can see how their plant was set up to do all of it. Everything was based around, and he said it came from auto manufacturing. Basically, these like 10 by 20 metal sleds that the big crane in the middle of the room or the middle of the building can pick and choose where they put these big metal sleds, and they get loaded, they go into the storage area, and then they come out as needed. And then workflow goes onto it, and it gets stored until the guys that are assembling are ready for it. And then it slides to them, and everything's laid out and labeled, and they're not picking anything up. That was like, man, that you and I were standing there watching that guy glue and nail and staple headers. And it was like, that header was only like 10 feet long. I would have picked that up.
Yeah.
Not a chance.
Nope.
Like, they walked over, he hooked onto it. And then when he was done moving it over at the crane, he hooked the controls for the crane in the crane. And it's like, I wonder how much time they spent wandering around looking for those controls before the company was like, you put it back on the crane. It leaves the key in the truck. Don't like that sort of like, and it was just like the most well-oiled machine.
Yeah, one of the things that blew me away was in the dust collection, it knew what was on the sled, and it could switch the dust collection for gypsum or for wood, and send it to a different location.
The center, I think he called it the high bunk storage system. So all the sheet goods that come into the factory, whether it's a sheet of OSB or a sheet of CLT or a sheet of gypsum, they load it right off the truck, basically into the warehouse, into this automated sled device that you were talking about. And it sucks it into the warehouse, and it just puts it on a shelf, and the computer knows where it's at on that shelf. So when they call for a certain panel to be built, they know it's taking CLT or it's taking gypsum or it's taking, OSB, and it's all completely automated. There's no human having to pick it up, not even with a forklift. It's just automatically taken, set on a sled outside the biggest CNC machine I think I've ever seen in my life. And it knows what's on the sled. It knows, obviously a CNC machine is set up to do that, but it pushes it out. And like you said, the dust collection system knows to transfer from gypsum to wood by what's on the sled. And once it gets out onto the floor, there was 2 lines, right? Two wall lines. And I think there was 1 or 2 floor lines. And those were pretty cool too, how they were set up. Yeah,
and actually I think it was 1 line, and they were just butterfly. So the studs laid out, and then they put the sheathing on. Most of it was this fiberglass reinforced gypsum or cellulose reinforced gypsum. They staple that all together, and then they flip it over and sandwich it, and then guys climb up there and start putting insulation in it. I'm still kind of like blown away by the whole thing.
I've been in panel shops in the U.S. and it's
same here.
All it is framing inside.
Yeah,
it's not like that. It's completely different.
Yeah, I was watching the panel. We couldn't figure out because the panel had an angle to it, and then the angle was also pitched. And so Ben grabbed a hold of one of the guys, and he brought over the plans and showed us out of like what looks like hundreds of panels, the little corner one that was a roof panel. And so they were gluing a big glue lam angled cut piece. So the way it looks right now is that the piece itself is angled, but once it's in place, now the piece is horizontal, and that was the top plates. Oh. And so we were looking at a corner of the overhang where there was going to be this section of wall, and that other off angle was sticking out past the wall.
Okay.
And so watching the two younger guys verify that they were gluing it in the right spot, and then everything's screwed with these big long screws, right? And I'm like, I bet you if that showed up and I was the guy in the field, I'll bet that thing is to the millimeter.
Yeah, I agree. Let's talk about the shipping process. As silly as it is to talk about how great this tour was, that shipping process was kind of mind-boggling for me. So you and I were standing there, Tim, and we saw a panel get finished. Guy walked over with the crane. He's got the controls around his belt just the same way as like our pump truck operator or a crane operator sometimes has. You want to talk about lift points?
Yeah, I mean, how do you describe that over podcast? So like top and bottom plates have a little routed channel that they just run straps around, and they stick out. We watched the one guy nailing and gluing, and he stops right at the line and then goes right past. So you don't actually shoot through the strap.
Yep.
Then
and he's pulling on it as he works through, because he knows if it's going to get stuck, he's going to have to back up and take care of something.
Yeah. And then those straps are rigging straps for when they're delivered in the field. They're not used in the factory. Yeah. And so then watching the guy come over with the controls and just rig to it. I mean, I think if I stood there and was able to actually successfully film the whole thing, because I kept getting distracted, it's like 30 seconds. He hooks on, he sends it up, and then it like goes flying down over and then down the other way. It's not like walking speed. Yeah. I would have to speed walk to keep up with that thing moving.
Yeah. And then it went over to another spot where they stood him vertical. Everything's laying flat at this point. They stood him vertical, and he said, this is where we put glazing in if we're going to put glazing in, or sometimes they do other details there. They had a separate line as well that was like for stuff that was going to be overly complicated. They moved it to the side so it didn't hold up all of production, which makes sense. And then everything gets stacked on one of these little like metal sleds. And this little metal sled, I call it little, it's the size of a semi. And it's like 10 inches off the ground. And everything gets stacked on there, shrink wrapped, banded all together and everything. And I noticed a couple of them felt like they had ratchet straps that went into the shrink wrap up and down and back over. But a couple of them didn't have that. And I wondered how they were fastened, but they're under the shrink wrap. And I wasn't going to be the one to cut somebody else's shrink wrap work, because a semi's worth of shrink wrap work away.
The other thing that kind of impressed me too, he explained at the beginning, every station has their set of fasteners, and somebody roams to stock fasteners. So you put the little flag up or down.
Yep.
And that way, because how many times have I done that? Well, I thought I brought a box of nails upstairs. Where is it? And you wander around to find it. And
that was true in this window factory as well. And the explanation they gave, which I thought was a good one, is those carpenters cost a lot of money. And it's much more efficient to have an apprentice go run and get the screws or the materials or the fasteners than having the carpenter to stop what he's doing and go get that material or those fasteners, which obviously makes a lot of sense. Very organized.
Yeah, and even at the other place, I got the impression in talking with the CEO, that's not a low man on the totem pole position. He's an expert in what fasteners need to go where, and he's a stocking professional, and he has as much pull in the factory as everybody else. He's just that support staff position.
Wow.
You know, we look at it as send the new guy to the van to get what we need, but they were just like, no, him being good at his job is just as important as everybody else being good at their job.
I feel like going through all these tours, I found like maybe 10 jobs I wouldn't mind moving to Switzerland to do. You know, I wouldn't mind being the person to go get the fasteners. I wouldn't mind being the person that was...
especially on the scooters.
Yeah, right? And then watching them fasten that wood insulation on top. I'm like, I wouldn't mind doing that. And then watching the guys fasten, the header and glue it down. That guy was a rock star. He was hustling.
Yeah,
I can see you as the company yodeler here.
I could be the company yodeler, with a little bit of practice.
Would you like to practice now?
No.
Okay, so back to the sled, because I'm still blown away. He moved the crane over. He hooked to it on both sides. Everything's like a toolless connection. It's a oblong key. You slide it in one way, turn it. It lifts that direction, and it can't pull out of these sleds. And we've seen these sleds everywhere in the country. So it's a uniform thing. He pressed one button on the crane, and it lifted it to a specific height, which was like, 6 inches higher than what it would need to be in its final location. And the legs dropped down. And he went around one by one, dropped the legs down. It took less than a minute and a half, maybe, for him to drop the legs down on this thing. And then he pressed a button, and the crane set it right back down. And it was all like, Tim and I are standing there like, he's going really fast. Why is he? That's coming down really fast. Like, and it came down, rested nicely. He unhooks it. The crane's gone in 5 minutes, and it's ready for a semi to just back underneath of it.
Wow, I didn't see
And it's genius, that they can. But the thing that I had not processed, my brain doesn't get there unless somebody points at it and tells me exactly what's going on. They do the same thing to unhook it at the job site. The trailer lowers and drives away, and that thing stays there. So you're not paying the semi driver to sit there and wait for them to crane.
Then the metal I-beams, right? They were like spreader bars for each of the 4 hooks. He had one on each side. I imagine it like if they build a boat inside, right? And you strap from the bottom and it kind of cradles. Then he goes over and sets that on sawhorses, like what I would call sawhorses, right?
Yeah.
And then unhooks it and then sends the crane down for something else. And so just watching him work, he could run all day with the crane controls, and he never lifted anything but the crane controls.
Yeah. And our tour guide said their facility is set up so that no one in the building has to wait for a crane. If it's time for them to have a crane and start moving it, there's one available that they can grab and start moving. And they had the line, the production line that we're talking about, they had cantilevered cranes over top of every workstation. Everything was set up so that there were pathways so that the big lift could get through for anything. But we're not breaking our backs. We're working in a way that's going to be smart. We're going to last long. Caring about the employees, caring about the people so that the people care about the company.
And it was clean. The 2 things I noticed, and this guy was farther away, so it's not like we were all huddling and he was trying to clean up. Before he would glue, he blew everything off.
Yeah.
And then the 2 younger guys that were installing the insulation, did you see the scrap? Immediately went over to the bag.
Yep.
And it's like nobody's tripping on any of that stuff. I've been really impressed by just the cleanliness.
The care, the deliberate nature of what's going on.
That's a good word to describe it, the care.
Michael, you have the pleasure of getting to sit with us while we do like our last 5 minutes for the whole week. What summation for the week do you take away besides deliberate care for everything that we've seen? Or is that?
I think that hits it right on the head, to be honest with you. Care. It's I don't want to say pride, because it's not like we don't have pride in what we do at home. But I don't think our level of care is up to snub in comparison to here in Switzerland. And you see that in the cleanliness of the facility, of the workplace. We went into a couple of different factories today, and there was nobody goofing around or joking around. They were all serious, all down to business, not talking or jibber jabbering, around. They were just getting their stuff done. And at a high level of execution, everyone wanted to get their job done right. And it was really refreshing to see, because you guys know we're fighting that kind of attitude all the time on the job sites, and it comes to the point where you just want to do it yourself because you can't rely on someone to do it right. And it was cool to see that, and I guess that goes back to the whole sustainability thing. They really push that sustainability, and if you don't have a certain level of care in what you build, you're not going to get that level of sustainability.
Yeah, and one of the other tour participants was telling me earlier that one of the guys here at the window plant was telling them that everything being built in Switzerland has to be Minergie certified, which is basically passive house. Everything.
Wow, right there.
Yeah, you got to pay more attention. I wanted to see, Tim, if you would. You were telling me the other day about a family friend that's of Swiss heritage. He was born here, right?
Yeah, I grew up in Switzerland, and
like his work nature. And how you're like understanding that.
Yeah, because we grew up with his father-in-law. And we've known Adolf for years. He's, I think, 82 or 83. Nothing ever goes to waste. He's still driving the 1980s Volvos that they've always driven. And before that, they were probably driving from the 60s, They didn't upgrade until the 2000s to an 80s Volvo. Everything on his piece of property, like we came to Switzerland in 2009, and we met his sister. And we kept seeing wood piles with like a piece of metal on top. We're like, that's like Adolf's property. If he goes and he cuts up a tree that fell, he stacks it right there, and then he covers it, and it's there. He can come back to it. Everything he does is so deliberate. As kids, we were over chopping firewood for his father-in-law, old Willie. He was pretty old at the time. And we were all swinging axes like crazy trying to chop firewood. And Adolf swings nice and slow and hits everything exactly where it needs. The pieces of firewood were all the same size. And as kids, we were just like, and now being in Switzerland for the second time, it makes total sense. It's like it's imprinted in their DNA that you don't waste movements. You don't waste land. I haven't seen, have you guys, as we're driving around on the buses, have you noticed you don't have people weaving and road raging? And like, people don't seem to have, and I know in the city it would be a little different, but even in Lucerne, watching everybody ride bikes, do you see anybody honking at the people riding bikes?
No, actually, this morning I noticed that there was the white line that you pull up to stop at a red light. The bike path came next to it, and then there were bikes in front of it and a yellow line, so that every time you got to a stoplight, the bikes could catch up and get in front of everybody and start again.
Interesting.
I was like, what?
It just, yeah, I think maybe because we're so young in the States and just, just our culture, the whole stop and smell the roses seems to apply more to Switzerland, where they just are more deliberate. And it's almost like, if I knew I had another 500 years of life, maybe I'd slow down a little bit. And that's how it feels, even though their lifespan's about the same as mine.
Yeah.
They're just a different vibe.
So I wanted to say thank you to Siga for bringing us out. This has been an incredibly educational trip. I wish we could have done it 15 or 20 years ago so Peter could have come, but it happens. We all get old. So we're clear, Michael. I'm not sure if you listen to the podcast, but this is a constant theme. Peter is old. That's why we pick at him. And this is more just to see if he listens when he's not on the podcast, or if he's just full vein and only listens to the podcast when he's the one. Even if he just listens to the one where he's just the host, like he doesn't want to hear it either way. But it was an honor to get to come and see this stuff. And it was like, yeah, we got to see how Siga operates, but everything else was like, think about what you're looking at, and like that influences how Siga operates.
I kind of feel like it wasn't a Siga trip.
Yeah.
It was like they were the travel agent that just facilitated all these other things.
Exactly. Yeah.
And Etienne and Jess from Siga were both amazing hosts.
This really was not what I was expecting. And Etienne deserves a huge amount of the credit. He did a great job organizing. Everybody got along. I think everybody's helpful. I don't know, maybe it's Switzerland rubbing off on all of us too.
Yeah, that's not such a bad thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I got to meet new people like Michael.
I got to go hiking in the Alps. I've been looking forward to this for months, and it lived up.
I got to be on a podcast.
Exactly. If we choose to publish it.
Someday you'll go on a real one. Yeah. Yeah, we'll make it to the internet.
I'll press record on this one, and then we can do it again so you can say that. On that note, thank you, Siga. Thank you guys for listening today. Thank you for hosting with me.
Thanks for having me.
Tim, thanks for sitting with me all week.
Yeah.
This was a lot of work to cram these in each day in a very full schedule already. So it means a lot to me that you...
Yeah, this was all the time I normally would have used to shower, and I look forward to showering when I get home. Yeah.
On that note, what a apropos ending to the Unbuild It podcast. Have a good day. Thanks for listening.